Welcome back to the deep dive. We take your sources and, well, we dig deep to bring you the key insights.
That's the plan.
Today, we're diving into a really complex and frankly turbulent period in Kenya's post-independence history. We're using Daniel Branch's book, Kenya, Between Hope and Despair, as our main guide.
Yep, a very insightful book.
And we're focusing specifically on chapters 3 and 4, that crucial decade from around 1971 up to 1982.
Right, our mission here is to unpack this pivotal era. We're talking about President Kenyatta's later years, which got pretty authoritarian.
Marked by that shocking assassination of J.M. Kariuki.
Exactly. And then there's the whole transition to Daniel Arap Moi's presidency. It wasn't smooth. We see a one-party state established, even a coup attempt.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a period just packed with political maneuvering, major social shifts, and events that, really changed the course for ordinary Kenyans.
Okay, so building on that overview, let's start with Kenyatta in the early 70s. The book suggests his leadership style changed, became more anxious.
Determined, maybe anxious too, yeah. What's really striking is his deep fear, apparently, of the Kikuyu have-nots.
That's not.
Particularly the Maukau veterans, the landless. People who felt the promises of independence hadn't materialized for them.
Especially regarding land, I imagine.
Precisely. He worried they'd be driven into the forest again, like during the Mau uprising. Feared assassinations of ministers, civil servants. It shows a leader really grappling with the potential fallout of those unfulfilled promises.
So if large groups felt left behind, who stepped up to voice their concerns? Where did people turn?
That's where J.M. Kariuki comes in. A really fascinating, ultimately tragic figure.
Right.
He became this very powerful, very charismatic critic of Kenyatta's land policies, the rising inequality.
Was he a radical?
Not in the traditional sense, no. The book notes he accepted U.S. funds, was wary of Soviet influence. But his critique of that growing gap between rich and poor in Kenya, it was sharp, and it really resonated with a lot of people. He spoke for those feeling left out.
We often hear about Kenya's economic growth after independence being quite impressive. Does Branch's book complicate that picture for the average person?
Oh, absolutely, yes. There was significant economic expansion. You had about 500,000 African farmers resettled on 2 million acres of former European land by 1970. That sounds good on paper, but it didn't solve the underlying problems. You still had structural inequality, large farming interests dominating. And many small farmers ended up burdened with huge debts from buying that land. They struggled just to make ends meet. And the government's policy of development on the cheap or self-help, well, it put way too much responsibility onto individuals, onto communities without enough state support. It often made things harder, actually, deepening those inequalities.
Okay, now let's talk about something the book terms Kikuyu ascendancy. This sounds like a deliberate strategy. How did it work?
It was definitely deliberate. You see this politically driven push for Kikuyu settlement in areas that weren't traditionally Kikuyu, like the Rift Valley, the coast.
So moving people in.
Exactly. Take the Lake Kenyatta settlement near Lamu. It was supposedly for displaced people generally, but ended up with 3,600 Kikuyu settlers. And this, understandably, caused a lot of resentment among the local communities. They saw it as the state favoring one group.
I remember reading a quote capturing that feeling. Someone challenging Kenyatta.
Yes, an anonymous resident, Raphael Kangu from Kakamega. He asked the president, quite bluntly, if Kenya was just one tribe or one man with his family.
Wow, direct.
And accused the ruling party, Kanio, of being for Kikuyu only. That sentiment was widespread, and this wasn't just about land.
It spread to institutions, too.
Definitely. Kenyatta started reducing the influence of the Kamba ethnic group in the Army's senior ranks, replaced key figures like General Ndolo, promoted Kikuyu officers. He even put special branch intelligence officers inside Army barracks to watch for any plotting. And the judiciary felt the pressure, too. Chief Justice Wendiwa was reportedly implicated in some plot because he supposedly disobeyed an order from Njanjo, the Attorney General, about pardoning Mboya's killer. It was about consolidating control everywhere.
And with power concentrating like that and ethnically skewed, corruption must have followed.
Almost inevitably. The land transfer program itself was a major source. Land bought with British loans, meant for the landless, often got snapped up and resold quickly to political insiders, used for patronage, pure profit. And then you had international smuggling rackets.
Smuggling? Like what?
Devoting essential domestic food supplies, maize, for example, to neighboring countries like Idi Amin's Uganda, where they could get higher prices. This made shortages worse inside Kenya and drove up prices for ordinary people.
So power concentration, inequality, corruption. Feels like a pressure cooker building.
Which brings us to that really dark moment, J.M. Kariuki's assassination. A truly pivotal, tragic event. After Tom Mboya was killed earlier and Odinga detained, Kariuki really was the most prominent voice of dissent left standing.
What was he advocating for, specifically?
He was quite bold. He wanted the government to stop repaying those British loans used to buy out European farmers.
Okay.
And he wanted the debts canceled for the Kenyan farmers who'd been resettled on that land. But politics is complicated, right?
How so?
Well, Kariuki himself made a kind of deal, an uneasy pact, with powerful figures like Charles Njonjo. The book calls it Kamau for Smith.
Meaning?
Basically, legal troubles against Kariuki were dropped, but he had to keep quiet in Parliament for a while. It shows the murky compromises sometimes made, even by critics. But that truce didn't last.
And then things got really ominous leading up to his death.
Yeah, a chilling sequence of events. Bomb explosions started happening in Nairobi, one at the Starlight nightclub, another at a Hilton Hotel Bureau de Change. Kariuki's own car was shot at.
Creating chaos.
Exactly. And rumors started swirling about some mysterious Maskini Liberation Front. Then came the horrific bus bombing in Mombasa, March 1st, 1975. 17 people killed. It created this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty.
And in the middle of all this, Kariuki disappears.
Just vanishes. Days go by, no word. His family hears rumors. They go to the city mortuary.
Oh, no.
And they bluff their way in and identify his body on March 11th. What's really shocking is the immediate cover-up attempt.
How did they try to cover it up?
A major newspaper, the Sunday Nation, ran a front-page story claiming he was alive and well in Lusaka, Zambia. Tried to paint him as involved with subversive groups abroad. Just blatant misinformation.
But the truth couldn't be contained. What did the official investigation find?
Well, public pressure forced a parliamentary investigation, and that committee confirmed a definite link between Kariuki's murder and those bombings. They found evidence. The CID, the police's criminal investigation department, had actually fabricated evidence. They pointed fingers at high-ranking officials like Getty, the head of the GSU, the paramilitary police, suggested he might have been actively involved or an accomplice.
Did they name the killer?
They suspected a police officer named Pius Kivathi Thuo shot him in the Ngong Hills. Apparently, this same officer had previously tried to kill another politician, Charles Rubia.
That's incredibly damning. How did this affect Kenyatta? You mentioned his legitimacy.
It damaged it profoundly. Kariuki was seen as a man of the people, speaking out against the elite. His murder felt like a betrayal of everything independence was supposed to stand for. Kenyatta apparently got nicknames like the Finisher or the Little Killer.
Oof. And the state's reaction to the public anger.
Crackdown. Widespread repression. People arrested just for speculating about Kenyatta's involvement, or for destroying his photos or passing around leaflets deemed seditious. Parliament, which had shown some independence, was basically silenced. Opposition MPs jailed or harassed. Kenyatta was clearly determined to crush any challenge.
So as Kenyatta's health starts to fail in the late 70s, the focus shifts to who comes next. The book paints this succession struggle as quite intense.
Oh, absolutely. A classic power vacuum situation fought largely behind closed doors. Kenyatta never named an heir, which kind of fueled the fire.
Who are the main contenders?
You had Nero Mungai, who was part of Kenyatta's inner Kikuyu circle, and then Daniel Arap Moi, who was vice president but from a different ethnic group, the Kalenjin.
And Moi had backers.
Yeah, powerful figures like Charles Njonjo, the Attorney General, and Bruce Mackenzie, a former minister with strong British business ties. They seemed to fear Mungai might disrupt their interests.
Interesting alliances.
Very. And there's this telling detail. A British diplomat apparently described Moi as totally thick. The expectation among some Kikuyu elites was that he'd be a puppet they could control.
It turned out to be quite wrong, didn't it?
A major miscalculation, yes. But while this elite maneuvering was happening, what about other forms of dissent? Intellectuals, grassroots movements.
Were they still active?
They tried, but they were systematically crushed. Look at Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the famous writer, a constant critic.
I know his work.
He was arrested without trial in December 77. The trigger.
Yeah.
His play, I Will Marry When I Want. It wasn't just staged in a big theater. It was put on by a local community group in a poor village near Limuru. It connected directly with people.
That must have worried the authorities.
Deeply. Even after Ngugi was released, he stayed defiant, spoke out about his detention, kept pushing for peasant and worker initiative. But the harassment continued, and eventually that community theater project, Kamirithu, was shut down. It shows how scared the government was of any organized popular voice.
So, Moy finally takes over after Kenyatta dies in 78. How does this supposed puppet actually consolidate his power?
He moves surprisingly fast and quite ruthlessly. He starts dismantling Kenyatta's old guard, and he goes after powerful ethnic organizations, especially Jima, the Gikuyu, Embu, and Meru Association, which have been a huge source of Kikuyu power.
How did he target Jima?
He used charges of financial irregularities. Jima executives, like the powerful politician Kihika Kimani, faced fines. Kimani's political base in the Rift Valley was deliberately weakened through Kenny party elections that were clearly manipulated. Moy made it clear he wouldn't tolerate these ethnic power blocks.
Becoming more authoritarian himself.
Increasingly so. He publicly condemned critics, eventually moved to formally dissolve all ethnic associations. When Waru Kanja, a respected Mau Mau veteran, spoke out about the Kariuki and Amboya murders, Moy threatened him directly. The message was clear. Challenge me at your peril.
And the economy, under Moy's early rule, did things improve?
Not really. It was plagued by mismanagement and, again, massive corruption. There were scandals involving government ministers smuggling basic foods like maize reserves out of the country for personal profit.
While people were going hungry.
Exactly. And then you had IMF-imposed austerity measures, public spending cuts. These were meant to stabilize things, but they actually fueled more corruption among officials trying to make up lost income, and they wrecked the old patronage systems politicians relied on. It created more instability.
But even with this tightening grip, resistance didn't just disappear, right? Especially among the youth.
No, it didn't. Student activism really picked up. The University of Nairobi became a hotspot. It had already been closed something like 25 times between 61 and 80 because of protests.
Wow.
Students had initially welcomed Moi, hoping for change, but they got disillusioned fast. Issues like Ngugi not being allowed back to his university job, terrible campus conditions, overcrowding, even reports they were being fed animal feed while their proper food was sold off.
That's grim.
It is. Moy's reaction was harsh. Blamed radical lecturers, even hinted the protests were plots to assassinate him. And it wasn't just university students. School kids were striking widely by 1982. Discontent was spreading.
With protests being met with such harshness, what was the next step for Moy to cement control?
The move towards a one-party state seemed almost inevitable by then. Ojinga Odinga, always the persistent critic, kept challenging Moy on the economy, on foreign policy, denouncing the shift towards neoliberalism.
And Moy's response?
A direct threat to bring back detention without trial, just like Kenyatta. Then in June 1982, Parliament voted unanimously, which tells you something about the pressure they were under to make Kenya officially a one-party state. Kenya was the only legal party.
So no legal opposition possible anymore?
None. Key critics, their lawyers, swiftly detained without trial. Any space for public debate like Mugi's community theater was stamped out. The door for peaceful legal opposition was slammed shut.
So if you can't protest legally, what happens? Does the opposition go underground?
That's exactly what happened. Underground pamphlets started appearing, like Pambana, which means struggle or power.
Circulating secretly.
In Nairobi, yeah. They fiercely denounced Moi's regime, accusing it of sowing discord, looting unspeakable sums. They declared very powerfully, this is not independence.
Yeah.
And they called for the overthrow of imperialism and neocolonialism. It shows how desperate and radicalized the opposition had become.
A really volatile situation, and this leads directly to the 1982 coup attempt.
It culminates in that, yes. A dramatic attempt led by a young Air Force private, Hezekiah Ochuka Rabala. But the book shows it had deeper roots.
Involving who?
Figures close to Ojinga Odinga were implicated, including his chief bodyguard, who'd had military training overseas but was kept out of the Kenyan army. Odinga's own son, Rallo, was also linked. The plotters were overwhelmingly from the Luo ethnic group, reflecting those deep ethnic tensions and grievances.
How did Moy handle the coup attempt?
It was crushed, quite brutally. But Moy used it very shrewdly to consolidate his power even further. He purged the Air Force, cracked down harder, and he even used it to try and discredit former allies, who he now saw as rivals, like Charles Njunjo, by suggesting they were involved. It effectively ended that long succession battle, cementing Moy's rule. But the cost to Kenyan democracy was immense.
What an absolutely packed and intense decade. From Kenyatta tightening his grip, the The shock of the Karaoke assassination, the silencing of dissent.
Yeah, and then that uneasy transition to Moy, who quickly goes from supposed puppet to absolute ruler, shutting down all opposition, leading to a one-party state and that dramatic coup attempt.
The constant theme seems to be this struggle for power, deeply intertwined with resources, especially land, and the increasing, often dangerous role of ethnicity in politics.
It really is striking. You see the shift from the initial outward celebration of independence to the grim realities of internal power struggles and repression. The pressure building just beneath the surface is almost tangible as you read through this period.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? With all that suppression, all those dramatic events, what was simmering underneath? What were the long-term consequences of this era for Kenya's future, for its ongoing struggles for justice and prosperity?
And that raises a broader question, perhaps for you listening. How do societies deal with periods like this, where power becomes so concentrated and dissent is so forcefully suppressed? What are the legacies decades later, especially when those core issues land, inequality, political freedom, maybe haven't fully been resolved? What does this specific Kenyan decade tell us about navigating hope and despair?